She said it between bites of roasted chicken. No whine, no raised voice, not even eye contact. She cut into her plate, chewed slowly, then laid the words down like a linen napkin, calm, folded, intentional. "You are lucky I chose you." The sentence did not hang in the air. It landed, final and dry. She did not mean it as flirtation. She meant it as fact. I watched her press the knife against the skin again, carving neatly through a thigh. Her posture never shifted. My fork paused halfway to my mouth, then followed through. I chewed. I swallowed. I nodded once. It was not the first time she had said something like that, but it was the first time she had meant for me to hear it. I studied her in silence. The way she sat with one ankle hooked behind the other, the way she barely looked at me anymore unless she was calculating the impact of what she was about to say. I could have responded. I could have asked what she meant. But that would have granted her too much control over the moment, so I smiled, briefly. And then I passed her the salt she had not asked for. She smiled back faintly, not because she meant it, because it fit the scene. We finished dinner in silence. She cleared the plates. I stood and helped dry them. She touched my back once as she passed behind me, absent-minded, mechanical. No warmth, no lingering intention. In bed that night, she turned toward the wall. I watched the curve of her shoulder rise and fall with each breath. I knew that rhythm. I had watched her sleep for years, and I could still tell when she was pretending. I lay there, eyes open, letting the ceiling fan draw slow shadows across the room. Her words had not offended me. They had clarified something. She believed I had been chosen, selected, as if love had been hers to bestow and I should remain grateful for the privilege. It had been gradual, months, maybe years. She had rewritten the dynamic, one unspoken rule at a time. She decided where we went, who we saw, how much we shared. She dressed more sharply, laughed louder in public, curated our life for others to watch. And I had allowed it, not because I was weak, but because I had believed that love required patience. But gratitude, that had never been part of the agreement. I thought back to that specific moment. Her tone had been clean. No anger, no cruelty. She had said it the way a manager explains your job description. It was not the words that stuck with me. It was the certainty behind them, and that certainty was new. The next morning, I sat at the kitchen table long after she left for work. I scrolled back through old photos on my phone. Her face had changed. Her eyes used to meet mine in every picture. Now they met the camera. I opened my notebook, something I used mostly for work deadlines and reminders to call contractors, and drew a line down the center of a blank page. On the left, I wrote, "Before she said it." On the right, "After." It was not about revenge. It was about data, truth. I was not going to accuse. I was going to observe. At the bottom of the right-hand column, I wrote 6 words: "Do not ask, only confirm." That was the last night I took her words at face value. From that moment on, I would be watching, not because I was insecure, but because I was ready to learn exactly what kind of choice she believed she had made, and whether it was a choice she was still making. She began jogging again on Thursdays. At least, that was what she told me. She would come home flushed, a sheen of sweat just visible along her collarbone, and drop her keys in the dish by the door like nothing had changed. But something had. I noticed it the 3rd week in a row, how her shoes were clean, how her pulse did not race when I kissed her neck, how her hair smelled like dry shampoo instead of salt and wind. She had always been meticulous, but this was curated, rehearsed. One evening I stood by the window as she left, watched her climb into a car she had not ordered herself. Not a ride share, not her usual driver. The man behind the wheel never looked up. She slid into the passenger seat without hesitation, like it was a routine. She had told me she would be running the North Trail, her favorite. I knew that trail. I knew the parking lot, the entry points, the time it would take to drive there. So I waited exactly 7 minutes after her taillights disappeared, grabbed my keys, and followed the route in silence. There was no car matching hers in the lot. I circled twice, waited 15 minutes. A few other joggers passed by, earbuds in, heads down. None of them were her. I drove back slower. She returned home 50 minutes later than she should have. Her cheeks were red. Her leggings had a streak of dirt on the thigh. She tossed me a tired smile, kissed the side of my mouth, and said, North Trail was packed tonight. She turned toward the shower before I could reply, not that I planned to. The silence was not a punishment, it was calibration. I began writing things down, not in the notebook I used for work, but in a separate journal she did not know existed. I kept it in my office behind the unused router box beneath a row of financial binders I knew she never touched. The entries were brief, time-stamped, clean. Thursday, 6:32 p.m. leaves in gray Audi sedan. License plate partial 3ZR. 7:13 p.m. no sign at North Trail lot. 8:09 p.m. returns. Dirt on leggings. Claims trail was crowded. I kept the language clinical. No emotion, no accusation. The point was not to build a case. It was to understand the scope of the performance. Because that was what it was, performance. At home, everything remained soft-lit and coordinated. She arranged flowers before guests arrived. She curated wine lists. She laughed at my jokes, touched my hand across dinner tables, kept her social media profile picture set to a photo of the two of us from our anniversary trip to Maine. But something was hollow in her gestures now. She smiled with her teeth but not her eyes. She kissed me like she was checking a box. That was when I realized something simple and unsettling. I had become a character in her life, not a partner, a prop. We hosted her college friends one weekend. She poured wine, played the part of the perfect hostess. I stood in the kitchen after dinner and listened to her describe our marriage strength as a shared rhythm. Her hand was on my chest when she said it. They nodded, impressed. She looked at me while she said it, and there was something in her eyes that did not match the words. Not resentment, not guilt, something cooler, ownership. It was not about love, it was about narrative. I cleared the plates. She refilled glasses. Her friend Lisa asked how we kept things fresh. She laughed and said, "Mutual gratitude." That was the phrase that did it. Mutual gratitude. As though my love had become a transaction. As though her presence was a gift I was still expected to thank her for. I smiled at Lisa, answered politely, then walked outside to take out the trash. Not because it needed to be taken out, but because I needed 60 seconds without choreography. I stood beside the bins and looked up at the sky. No stars that night, just a flat sheet of city light pressing back the dark. I did not feel anger, I felt precision. She had made it clear I was lucky she had chosen me, but I had begun to see the inverse more clearly every day. She always left her laptop open after sending work emails. It was a habit built on routine, not carelessness. She trusted that I would not look. For most of our marriage, she had been right, but not anymore. That morning she left for the office 10 minutes earlier than usual. No kiss goodbye, just a voice from down the hall. "Can you remind the plumber to call before he shows up?" I waited until I heard the front door close, then counted to 30. Long enough to be sure she had committed to the day. I walked into the den and sat down at her desk. The laptop screen was dark. I tapped the spacebar, expecting a password prompt. It opened immediately. The inbox was clean. No recent messages. That told me more than a full inbox would have. She was either deleting threads or moving them off platform. I opened the browser. The history was cleared, but the tabs remained. Careless mistake. One of them was a furniture invoice. A mid-range interior designer specializing in short-term executive apartments. The order was specific: a sleeper sofa, minimalist desk, wall-mounted art of abstract cityscapes. The delivery address was not our home. I copied it down and closed the screen. Everything back exactly as it was. I waited until late that evening after she fell asleep before looking it up. The building was downtown, mixed use, mostly tech professionals and temporary residents. Too expensive for interns, too impersonal for couples, exactly right for what I suspected. I visited the building on a Thursday afternoon. I took a meeting remotely from a nearby cafe and used the break to walk the perimeter. No doorman, code-based entry. I waited until someone exited, then stepped in like I belonged there. I found the mailbox with the unit number. There was a last name listed. It was hers, not her married name, her maiden name. That was the moment everything shifted. This was not an affair born of confusion or momentary escape. This was structure, planning. She was not hiding. She was building a life parallel to the one we shared, using old pieces of her identity like bricks. Back at home, I kept my face still. I did not speak a word of it. That night we ordered Thai food. She poured me a drink and told me about her team's latest project. Her tone was light, performed, I matched it, I nodded, I asked questions, I laughed when she did, but I was gone already, not emotionally. Strategically, I began mapping patterns, not digitally, not through apps or trackers. That was too obvious, too easy to detect. Instead, I used absence. I noted when she did not answer texts during certain hours, when she turned off location sharing to save battery, when she stopped taking weekend calls on speaker. I began documenting everything in a separate journal kept in a travel bag, zipped in the lining beneath the spare charger. That bag remained in my car. It never entered the house. Her lies were not loud. They were silent edits, like how she started saying my apartment when she meant the office, like how she referred to late meetings instead of naming clients. These were not slips. They were choices. One evening she came home carrying a new bag, structured leather, deep green. I complimented it. She smiled, touched my face lightly and said, "A little upgrade, felt like I earned it." I told her it suited her. She looked pleased, but I had seen that exact bag 3 days earlier in the chair of a photo posted by one of her coworkers. The photo had not been from the office. It had been taken inside the living room of that second apartment. Same rug, same curtains, same bag. She had not earned it, she had installed it. The next morning I asked casually, "You said your lease was up soon, right?" She blinked. "What lease?" "For the office apartment," I said. I kept my voice mild. "The one your company uses for overnights." There was a pause, barely 2 seconds, but enough. Then she smiled and said, "Oh, that is not mine. I do not even have a key. I have only been there once." The lie was clean, practiced. I kissed her forehead before she left, held her gaze. She looked back at me unflinching. That was when I knew. She believed the role she was playing more than she believed in the life we had built. The name slipped out during a call she took in the hallway. It was late, just after 11, and she had already claimed exhaustion, already turned off her lamp. I had stayed in the living room reading, or pretending to. I heard the buzz of her phone through the bedroom door, muffled, then silence as she answered it and stepped into the hall. She did not close the door completely. That was her second mistake. The first was saying his name. She kept her voice low, almost affectionate, confessional in a way she never was with me anymore. "No, I was not going to text. That is why I waited. You always say I push my luck." Pause, soft laughter, then, "Because I wanted to hear your voice, Nathan." Nathan, not a colleague, not a client, not a cousin. She said it with the kind of familiarity people build through repetition. It was not the name that mattered. It was the way she dropped it like a bookmark, knowing she would come back to it soon. I did not move. I stayed in the dark, one hand resting on the spine of the unopened book, the other clenched under the throw blanket. She stayed in the hall for 7 minutes. I know because I counted. Not out loud, not even in my head. I felt it, each breath, each pulse. When she came back to bed, she said nothing. Climbed in, turned her back, and pulled the covers up to her shoulder. I waited another 10 minutes before returning to the bedroom. I lay beside her without touching her. The name echoed, not with pain, with clarity. She had chosen the wrong man to lie to. The next day, I opened a professional records database, one I used occasionally for client verification. I typed in the name, limited the radius to within 30 miles. Only 2 Nathan S. fit the right age range and career bracket. One of them had a public-facing profile connected to a consulting firm. I found a photograph on the company's website. The man was standing with a group outside a modern office. Sunglasses pushed back on his head, confident stance, familiar posture. He had been in our house before. I remembered him. He was a friend of her friend Lisa. He had given a toast at our wedding. The caption read, "Senior Strategist Nathan Sullivan." I searched email history. There was nothing under that name. No messages sent, no threads archived. She had scrubbed carefully. Or used a different device. But she had forgotten one thing, the shared music account. We had started it years ago, back when syncing playlists felt romantic. She never disconnected it, probably forgot it was even still active. I opened the listening history. A private playlist had been created 6 weeks ago. She had labeled it evening. The contents were not hers. The music was too specific, slow instrumentals, a jazz artist I had never heard her mention, a few spoken word tracks about emotional honesty and restraint. It was not curated for herself. It was designed to be shared, or to play in the background of something else. I added a track to the playlist, just one. Loyal instrumental version, no lyrics, just tone, just implication. She never asked about it. But 2 hours later, the playlist was deleted entirely. That was confirmation enough. I did not spiral. I did not yell or accuse or confront. That would have put her in control, and I had spent too many years deferring ground I had not meant to give. Instead, I began creating my own playlist, metaphorically speaking. A timeline, a paper trail, a collection of every name, location, item purchased, pattern of hours, and now, every voice she spoke gently to that was not mine. I reviewed bank statements again, this time with more precision. There were small but consistent charges from the same coffee shop downtown, always tagged midday Thursday. Once she had brought home a cup with my name written on it, but the sticker said Nate's order. She had overlooked the detail. That is what happens when lies become normal. You start forgetting the ones you told last. The next time she smiled at me, I smiled back. But I no longer saw her face the way I used to. I saw her like a photograph someone else had taken, a version of her meant for someone else's wall. The first time she mentioned the coworker, it had sounded harmless. A name dropped in the middle of a story about project delays and late-night deliverables. She had rolled her eyes, mimicking his voice, and said something about his obsession with brand synergy. I had barely registered it. That was months ago. Since then, the name had resurfaced 3 more times. Once when she laughed about an inside joke from a team dinner I had not been invited to. Another when she referred to him offhandedly as someone who just gets it. And then again, most recently, when she showed up late and said, "Sorry, Blake made us all stay for the presentation dry run. He is intense, Blake." It was always the same tone, light, dismissive, but never annoyed. And it was always paired with a reason I should not question it. Company dinner, leadership prep, office culture. But Blake had never appeared in any of the client-facing materials I reviewed from her firm. He had no LinkedIn profile, no signature on any of the quarterly newsletters. So I called the front desk of the building her company occupied and asked to be transferred to his extension. The receptionist paused. "There is no one here by that name," she said. I thanked her and hung up. Later that night, I asked her casually if Blake had ever transferred in from another office. She hesitated, not visibly but vocally. Just a slight pause before saying, "No, he has always been with us." "Why?" "Just wondering," I said. "You mention him a lot. I figured he must be running half the firm by now." She smiled thinly. "Feels like it some days." That was all. She went back to slicing vegetables. The next day I drove to the address from the furniture delivery slip. The building was locked, no concierge. But I waited outside with a clipboard I borrowed from my office, wearing a plain blue windbreaker and carrying a small package. Someone buzzed me in without question. I took the elevator to the 6th floor and found the unit. The door was a dark wood, newer than the others. Someone had changed the hardware recently. There was a keypad lock installed, digital, backlit, expensive, not standard for the building. That meant customization. That meant access control. I pressed the doorbell once, not expecting an answer. There was none. I walked the hallway slowly, looking for cameras. There were 2, one by the elevator, another at the far end near the stairwell. Both were fixed. Neither covered the apartment door directly. Back in my car, I opened the maintenance request portal for the building, publicly accessible to tenants. You could view open requests by unit number. Hers had 2 recent ones. Light fixture replacement. Keypad entry system reset. Filed 3 weeks apart. That told me something important. She had changed the code, not because of a malfunction, but because someone else had needed access or needed to be locked out. I remembered how she had once left our front door unlocked by mistake and apologized like she had burned the house down. She cared about boundaries, control, entry. And yet the only keys I ever held were for the home we shared. This other place, this second version of her life, I had never been invited to. Not once, not even in theory. At home, she asked if I wanted to go out for dinner Friday. "You have been quiet lately," she said. "I miss your energy." She said it with a smile, but it was testing the waters, checking the temperature. She knew something had shifted. "I have a work dinner," I said, "rescheduled from last week." She hesitated. "Oh, okay. Another night then." I nodded and returned to the spreadsheet in front of me. She stood there for a few seconds, then walked away. I stared at the numbers on the screen, not reading them, just anchoring myself to the stillness. I did not want to destroy her life. I wanted to understand how far she had already moved without telling me. I wanted to know who had the second key, because it was not me. I found the lease buried in a digital folder labeled Tax Documents 2023. The irony was not lost on me. It was late, just after midnight, and she had fallen asleep on the couch after pretending to watch a documentary she had chosen but never really engaged with. Her wine glass sat half full beside her, one ankle hooked over the other, body angled away from me even in sleep. The laptop rested on the ottoman, unlocked. She had been filling out forms for our accountant earlier, toggling between PDFs and the client portal. I waited 20 minutes pretending to read. Then I picked up the laptop without a sound and carried it into the kitchen. She had hidden it well, nested inside a directory that should have contained only boring things. W-2s, expense forms, quarterly summaries. But the file name stood out. A single line, initialed agreement BMS DocX. It meant nothing unless you were looking for something that should not be there. The lease was for a 12-month term, signed digitally, dated 6 weeks ago. Her name appeared twice, once in full, using her maiden name, and once in initials, beside a paragraph about guest permissions and liability. The second signature had been added a day later. That mattered. That meant it had been sent back for a revision, most likely by someone else involved. The other name on the lease was not Nathan. It was Blake. Blake M. Sutton. I stared at the document, letting each line harden into shape. Not because I needed more proof. I had moved beyond that. But because the exactness of it mattered. The facts would anchor me. Facts made emotion manageable, containable. They had leased the place together. That much was undeniable. The rent was higher than I expected. Not obscene, but enough that it would have required planning. And she had not touched our joint account for it, which meant she had been diverting her income, probably through the business credit card I never had access to. There was also a clause added for client hosting. I knew what it was meant to imply. A plausible reason for the apartment's existence. A way to explain overnight stays without admitting the truth. A lie dressed in professional language. I printed the lease from the wireless printer in my office. 4 pages, no notes, no highlights, just clean ink on smooth paper. I slipped it into the back of a folder already prepared with bank statement excerpts, timestamp location inconsistencies, and 4 photos, each one quiet, distant, but undeniable. I replaced the laptop exactly where I found it, closed the lid, turned off the kitchen light. She did not stir. That night I lay in bed beside her and thought about the word consent. Not in the way most people mean it, but in the way no one wants to talk about. What it means to be in a marriage under false terms. To commit while the ground beneath you has already shifted. To stay loyal to something your partner abandoned long ago but never had the courage or decency to admit. She had chosen to play house while leasing a life elsewhere. And still, she smiled at me in the mornings like she was proud of the balance she maintained. The next day, I scheduled 3 appointments. First, with a corporate lawyer to ensure the new consulting contracts I had recently acquired would be shielded from any marital claims. Second, with a real estate agent who specialized in discreet sales, properties transferred under corporate trusts with non-disclosure protections. Third, with a family accountant. Not ours, mine, someone I had used years ago before her. By the time she came home that evening, I was already 2 hours into restructuring the walls around my life, quietly, without emotion, not out of spite but out of necessity. She greeted me with a kiss too quick, her breath still carrying the mint from a drink she would not name. She asked how my day had gone. I said it was productive. That was the last casual conversation we would ever have. Because now I had a folder that told the whole story, and her signature was still wet. It happened sometime between pouring her coffee and hearing the front door click shut behind her. The shift. Not in mood, not in theory, but in purpose. I stopped asking why she had done it. I stopped trying to decipher the decisions that led her from our bed to someone else's apartment. The hours I had spent analyzing her tells, tracing her absences, decoding the softened voice and the familiar names, they all narrowed into a single conclusion. I did not need a motive. I needed an exit. She had made her choice. I was making mine. That morning I took the folder, 4 documents, nothing more, and walked it down to the firm I had retained through a private referral. No flashy signage. Just a name on the glass and a receptionist who did not ask unnecessary questions. The attorney I met wore a slate gray suit and spoke with the kind of calm I had learned to appreciate. No theater, no pitch, just quiet, confident precision. He skimmed the papers, read the lease twice, asked if I had shared these findings with her yet. I said no, I had not confronted her. I did not plan to, not until everything was in motion. Then you are ahead, he said. Most men wait too long. I left the office with a list of actions already set in motion. Not threats, protections. My accounts were being separated. Notifications were suspended. Future assets, contracts, equity distributions, bonuses would be held in a temporary entity until the dissolution process began. Not avoidance, strategy. At home, I made no changes, not visibly. The key hooks stayed where they were. The framed photos on the hallway wall remained untouched. She had once called that row of pictures the spine of our story. I let them hang there, quiet lies in polished wood. She texted me around 5:30, running late. Blake messed up a client file, have to stay. I replied, no problem, be safe. Then I put my phone face down. That night I prepared a simple dinner and ate alone. No wine, just stillness and the sound of the ice machine cycling once every 30 minutes. I looked around the house, the one we had bought together, and saw it for what it had become. A stage set. The kitchen was curated, the bedroom styled, the bathroom pristine. But it was not real. Not anymore. She came home after 10, wore guilt like a necklace, visible but meant to be ignored. She said, I owe you a night out. I feel like we are living side by side, not together. I nodded. It has been a strange season. She sat down next to me, legs folded underneath her. I want us back, she said. You know that, right? Her voice had the right rhythm, not shaky, not forced, theatrical in its steadiness. A woman auditioning for a role she no longer believed she deserved but still wanted to secure. I watched her hand move toward mine on the couch. I let it rest there. I believe you want something back, I said. She looked at me, brows tightening. What do you mean? But I had already stood up. I told her I needed to finish a document for a meeting. She nodded. No further protest. Upstairs, I opened the safe behind the framed print in my office. Not the main safe, she had access to that one. This one was mine alone. I placed the folder inside, locked it. Then I sat down and stared at my monitor. I did not feel rage. I did not feel loss. I felt alignment. The man she had chosen to deceive no longer existed. The man standing in his place did not need her explanations, her apologies, or her stories about late meetings and client dinners. He needed closure, and he was building it, one silent step at a time. I was not waiting for a final betrayal. I already had it. Now I was setting the stage for the final act. She walked into it unarmed. That was the only way I can describe it now, how she stepped into the confrontation like it was another night in a house still playing the role of home. It was a Thursday. I chose it deliberately. A mirror of the day she had first started jogging again, or claimed to. She came in through the garage, keys clinking in her hand, the same soft humming tune she always sang when she believed she was safe. I stood at the kitchen island. One drink. One envelope. She smiled when she saw me. You are home early. I did not answer right away. Just slid the envelope toward her across the marble surface. Not too fast, not too slow, just enough to break the performance. She looked down at it, then back up at me. What is this? Her voice held the first crack, barely audible, but there. I nodded once. It is yours. She opened the flap slowly, like she already knew but needed the confirmation to finalize the panic. Inside, the lease. The printed photos, a copy of the text transcript she believed had been deleted, a bank statement flagged with a red pen, highlighted charges to a shared corporate card that had never touched our shared life. Her hand gripped the edge of the envelope. Her nails pressed into the paper. She did not look up. "I was going to end it," she said quietly. "It was not what you think." I remained silent. Silence, I had learned, is not passive. It is tactical. It forces the speaker to fill the vacuum, to stumble over their own narrative. She stepped back from the counter, the envelope still in hand. It was temporary. It was stupid. I did not even know what I was doing. Another step back, like she was trying to physically move away from the consequences, as if the distance could dilute the truth. "I felt invisible," she said, voice rising, not loud, just unstable. "You were always so composed, so controlled. I needed something to feel like mine." I watched her, not the words, the breathing, the posture, the shift from confidence to calculation to desperation. "I never planned to leave you," she added. "I was going to fix it." I finally spoke. "You signed a lease." Her mouth opened, closed. She placed the envelope on the counter like it had become too hot to hold. "I did not think." "That much is clear," I said. She flinched. "Then I made a mistake." I shook my head. "You made a plan. You wrote checks. You used your maiden name. This was not a slip. It was a structure." Her face collapsed in stages. First the lips, drawn thin. Then the eyes, the way they stopped holding mine. Then the shoulders, rounding forward like gravity had just remembered her. "I do not know how to fix this," she said. I stepped around the island, picked up the envelope, and placed it back in her hands. "You are not going to fix it. You are going to own it." She did not speak again. I walked past her, up the stairs, and into the room that had once been ours. I closed the door, not loudly but with intention. She stayed downstairs for another 30 minutes. I heard her pacing, heard her stop, heard her footsteps climb slowly like she hoped I would open the door before she reached it. I did not. She never knocked. That night she slept in the guest room. No conversation, no bargaining, and for the first time in months I slept soundly, not because I was whole, but because the question had been answered. She had made her choice. Now she would learn to live with it. By the following Monday, the house was no longer shared. She still lived in it, moved through the kitchen, the bedroom, the hallway, but nothing she touched belonged to her anymore. I had begun the process in silence. Utilities rerouted, deeds reviewed, passwords changed, mail redirected, no announcements, just subtraction piece by piece. That morning I left early. She was still asleep in the guest room, curled small against the edge of a bed too big for who she had become. I did not wake her. I did not leave a note. The attorney had filed the initial motion the night before. The service window would open within 24 hours. She would receive the envelope, official, dated, signed, and there would be no discussion. The facts would be delivered. The logistics already handled. I had prepared a secondary bank account 2 weeks earlier, quiet, secure, invisible from the joint portfolio. My income now landed there. Automatic drafts restructured. My name removed from anything that could be used as leverage. I knew her habits. She would check the balance of our main account before her Wednesday lunch. That was when she would see it. Less activity, different withdrawals, a slower pulse than usual. She would sense it then. The pullback, the reset. That evening I was home when she opened the door. She stopped short in the entryway, holding a stack of mail. I watched her eyes scan the countertop, 2 folders laid flat. One labeled with her name, one with mine. "Where is the checkbook?" she asked, not looking up. "In the folder," I replied. Her hand trembled slightly as she opened it. She was expecting something. I could see it. A confrontation, an outburst. One more round of emotional debate where she could cry without saying anything, ask for time without giving answers, but I offered nothing. "I thought we were going to talk," she said. Her voice was low, uneven. I poured myself a glass of water. "We did. You talked. I listened. Then I made decisions." She stepped forward, holding a sheet of paper from the envelope. Her face had gone still. "You filed already?" I met her eyes. "Yes," she laughed once, not amusement, disbelief. "So that is it. That is the truth." She dropped the paper on the counter. "You are throwing away everything." "No," I said. "I am walking away from something that already threw me away. You just forgot to mention it." Her breath hitched. She leaned against the counter like it was the only solid thing left in the room. "This is not who I am," she whispered. I did not answer. She said it like a defense, like a question, like a plea, but none of those were my responsibility anymore. "I made mistakes," she said. You built an exit plan and kept me as backup. That is not a mistake, that is design." She looked away. The silence between us was not cruel, it was complete. That night she asked if we could pause everything. I told her no. There would be no pause, no reset, no negotiated delay. She asked where she was supposed to go. "I believe you already answered that when you signed the lease," I said. She closed her eyes. Her composure fractured for just a moment, but I did not reach for her. I did not comfort her. That would have betrayed the man I had finally become. The next morning she was gone before sunrise. No note, no message. I walked through the house in silence, touching nothing. Not because it hurt, but because I wanted to feel what it was like, fully and finally, to be alone in something that was mine again. The house did not echo when she left. It absorbed the absence like it had been waiting for it. I did not watch her pull out of the driveway. I heard it, the slow reverse, the idle pause, the faint crunch of gravel under tires, and I let it happen without going to the window. Letting her see me watch her leave would have given the moment weight it did not deserve. She took only what she had arrived with: a travel bag, a shoulder purse, a black coat too light for the season. No suitcases, no tears, no drama. That was 2 weeks ago. Since then the paperwork had moved without interruption. The service window closed, the response deadline passed. My legal team had not received a rebuttal, only silence, broken by a single email sent by her new attorney, a request for time to review terms. I approved it. The extension meant nothing. The outcome was unchanged. In the meantime, I had begun repurposing the space. Not renovating, reclaiming. Her desk was cleared, not thrown out, just reset. The framed photo of us on the Amalfi Coast was boxed and stored, not to erase her but to contain the story. I kept one picture, though, tucked into the drawer of my nightstand, not out of sentiment, out of clarity. A reminder of what it looked like when someone smiled before betraying you. Friends reached out. Some had heard whispers. Some had been told versions of events with pieces missing, timelines edited. A few sent cautious messages asking if everything was okay. I answered the same way each time. "I am fine. She is where she wants to be. No more, no less." Lisa, her friend, the one who toasted our rhythm, called and left a voicemail I did not return. I had no interest in managing how people chose sides. My job was not to curate a narrative. My job was to finish clean. The last conversation I had with her was 3 minutes long. It happened over the phone after she received the final asset list. She asked one question: "Is this really what you want?" I did not answer right away. I let the silence carry the weight. Then, "It is what is already true." She exhaled like she had been holding her breath since the day she signed the lease. "I never stopped loving you," she said. "I believe you never stopped needing something from me," I replied. "That is not the same thing." She hung up without a word. That was the end. No ceremony, no final blowout, just a closed line and a deeper kind of silence. Now the house is quiet in the right way. The air no longer feels held. Nothing is waiting to be revealed. I go on walks without pretending to be occupied. I come home without bracing. The notebooks are stored, the burner phone wiped, the documents shredded. Not because I want to forget, because I already remember enough. I am not healed. That word suggests a return to something previous. There is no return, there is only forward. I did not rebuild the version of myself she tried to keep on a shelf. What came next was not stronger or colder. It was simpler. I trust fewer people. I ask fewer questions, but I act faster when I know the answer. She once told me I was lucky she chose me. She was wrong. I was lucky I lived long enough to see exactly who she was and to walk away with both eyes open.